My name is Courtney, and for 3 years I scrubbed floors in the Henderson mansion while being treated like I was invisible. At 45, I thought I'd seen every type of wealthy family there was. The cold ones who barely acknowledged you existed. The demanding ones who found fault in everything. The paranoid ones who counted their silver after you left. But Marcus Henderson was different. He was worse. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, let myself in through the service entrance, and began my routine. Vacuum the Persian rugs, dust the antiques worth more than my annual salary, polish the marble floors until they gleamed. The twins, Emma and Ethan, were already awake. At 8 years old, they were beautiful children with their father's dark hair and their late mother's gentle eyes. But they lived in a world of silence. Both had been born profoundly deaf, and since their mother died 2 years ago, they'd become even more withdrawn. Marcus barely interacted with them. He hired the best nannies money could buy, enrolled them in the most expensive schools, but he kept his distance. I understood why. Grief does strange things to people, but watching those babies try to get their father's attention broke my heart every single day. "Morning, sweethearts," I signed to them as I entered the kitchen. I'd learned sign language years ago when my nephew was born deaf. The twins' faces lit up like Christmas morning. Their current nanny, Mrs. Peterson, was a stern woman in her 60s who believed children should be seen and not heard. Ironic, considering these two couldn't be heard even if they tried. She barely looked up from her coffee when I signed with them. "Don't encourage them, Courtney," she said coldly. "They need to focus on their lip-reading lessons." I bit my tongue. These children were starving for connection, for someone who could communicate with them in their own language. But I was just the help. My opinion didn't matter. As I cleaned the living room, I could hear the twins playing in their designated area. But something was different today. They kept looking toward the music room, where a piano sat collecting dust since their mother passed. Emma tugged on my uniform and pointed toward the piano. She made gestures I recognized. She was asking about music, about dancing. Her mother used to play for them, Mrs. Peterson had mentioned once. They could feel the vibrations, see the joy in her movements. My heart ached for them. Here's what I want you to do. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications. I have so many more stories to share with you, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning dragged on. Marcus left for his office without so much as glancing at his children. Mrs. Peterson disappeared for her afternoon break, which usually lasted 2 hours. The twins ate their lunch in silence, their small hands moving occasionally in basic signs they'd learned. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I walked to the music room and sat at the piano bench. The twins followed me, curious. I placed their little hands on the piano's surface and began to play a simple melody. Their eyes widened as they felt the vibrations through their fingertips. Then I stood up and began to move to the rhythm. Not fancy dancing, just simple, joyful movement that matched the beat. Emma clapped her hands together and started copying my movements. Ethan joined in, his face breaking into the biggest smile I'd seen from him in months. We danced together in that music room, the three of us creating our own language of movement and joy. For the first time since their mother died, these children were laughing. Silent laughter, but real and pure and beautiful. I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't hear the front door open, didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway, didn't realize we had an audience until I spun around and saw Marcus Henderson standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were filled with something I'd never seen before. The music stopped abruptly as my hands froze over the piano keys. Marcus stood there in his expensive suit, briefcase still in hand, staring at the scene before him. Emma and Ethan hadn't noticed their father yet. They were still moving to the rhythm they felt in their bodies, still smiling. Mr. Henderson, I stammered, stepping away from the piano like it had caught fire. He held up a hand to stop me. For a long moment, he just watched his children. Really watched them. Emma noticed him first, and her dancing slowed. She looked between her father and me with uncertainty, as if she'd done something wrong. Marcus's expression softened. He walked slowly into the room, and for the first time since I'd worked there, he knelt down to his children's eye level. He said something to them, I couldn't tell what, but they nodded eagerly and took his hands. "Show me," he said, looking up at me. His voice was rough with emotion. "Show me what you were doing." I hesitated. This was so far outside my job description. But those children were looking at me with such hope in their eyes. "They love music," I said carefully. "Even though they can't hear it, they can feel it. Their mother used to—" "I know what their mother used to do." His voice was sharp, but not angry, pained. "Show me." I sat back at the piano and played the same simple melody. The twins immediately placed their hands on the wood surface, feeling the vibrations. But this time, Marcus did too. I watched as understanding dawned on his face. Then I stood and began the simple dance moves again. Emma and Ethan joined in immediately, their movements more confident now. After a moment, Marcus stood too. Awkwardly, uncertainly, he tried to copy what we were doing. The sight of this powerful businessman, still in his $1,000 suit, trying to dance with his deaf children, made my throat tight with emotion. He was terrible at it, completely off rhythm, but his twins didn't care. They were beaming at their father's attention. We spent an hour together in that music room, an hour where the barriers between employer and employee, between father and children, seemed to dissolve. Marcus's initial stiffness gave way to genuine attempts at communication. He tried a few basic signs I taught him. He laughed when Emma corrected his movements. When Mrs. Peterson returned and found us all together, her face turned white with shock. But Marcus waved her away without explanation. "How long have you been able to communicate with them?" he asked me as we finally stopped playing. "Since I started working here," I admitted. "I learned sign language for my nephew." I noticed right away that Emma and Ethan were trying to sign, but no one was responding. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. "Why didn't you say anything?" I looked at him carefully. How could I explain that I'd tried, in small ways, that every time I'd suggested the children might benefit from someone who could sign, I'd been dismissed? That Mrs. Peterson had made it clear my input wasn't welcome? "I'm just the maid, Mr. Henderson. It wasn't my place." "Don't." His voice was firm. "Don't say that, not after what I just saw." The twins were playing now, still energized from our impromptu dance session. They kept looking between their father and me, as if they sensed something important had shifted. "Their mother," Marcus said quietly, "used to dance with them. Every day. It was their special time together. After she died, I couldn't. It hurt too much to be in this room." I nodded, understanding flooding through me. Grief had made him avoid everything that reminded him of his wife, including the joy she'd shared with their children. "They've been trying to tell me they missed it," he continued. "But I don't understand their signs well enough. I've been failing them." "You haven't been failing them," I said gently. "You've been protecting yourself. But they need you. They need their father." He was quiet for a long time, watching Emma and Ethan play. Then he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I want to hire you for something else. In addition to your current job, I want you to teach me. Teach me to communicate with my children properly. Teach me what my wife knew that I've forgotten." My heart started beating faster. This was dangerous territory. "Mr. Henderson, I don't think that's appropriate." "Courtney." The way he said my name made me pause. It was the first time he'd ever used it. "My children were more alive in the last hour than they've been in 2 years. You did that. Not the expensive therapists, not the specialized schools. You." "I just danced with them," I protested. "You communicated with them. You saw them as whole people, not broken children who needed to be fixed." There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. Something had changed in the way he was looking at me too. Not like I was invisible anymore. Not like I was just the help. But that scared me more than being ignored ever had. "I need to think about it," I said finally. He nodded. "Of course, but Courtney, thank you for giving me back my children." As I gathered my cleaning supplies and prepared to leave for the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just shifted in a way I wasn't prepared for. The twins hugged me goodbye, something they'd never done before. And Marcus watched the whole interaction with those unreadable eyes. I was halfway to my car when he called out to me. "Courtney, wait." I turned back. He was standing in the doorway, no longer the cold, distant employer I'd known for 3 years. "There's something else you should know," he said. "Something about why I've been so—" But before he could finish, His phone rang. A business call that couldn't wait. He answered it with obvious frustration, mouthing tomorrow to me. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes. Like he was seeing me for the first time. Like he was about to tell me something that would change everything. I had no idea how right I was. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the afternoon in my mind, the way Marcus had looked at his children, the way his whole demeanor had changed. But mostly, I thought about that unfinished sentence. What had he been about to tell me? I arrived at work the next morning to find the house in chaos. Mrs. Peterson was packing her bags in the hallway, her face red with indignation. "This is completely inappropriate," she was saying to Marcus, who looked like he hadn't slept either. "I've worked with the best families for 30 years, and I've never been dismissed so suddenly. Your services are no longer needed," Marcus said firmly. "You'll receive full severance, of course." Mrs. Peterson's eyes fell on me as I stood frozen in the entryway. Her expression turned venomous. "I see. Replacing me with the help, are you? This won't end well, Mr. Henderson. Mark my words." She pushed past me with her suitcase, muttering something under her breath that I pretended not to hear. The front door slammed behind her. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," Marcus said, running a hand through his hair. "I should have handled it more privately." "You fired her because of yesterday?" I asked, my stomach churning. "I fired her because she's been neglecting my children's emotional needs for 2 years, and I was too buried in my own grief to notice." His voice was tired but determined. "Yesterday opened my eyes to a lot of things." Emma and Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, still in their pajamas. They looked confused by the commotion. Marcus signed something basic to them. I could see he'd been practicing. They smiled and ran down to hug him. "I meant what I said yesterday," he told me as the twins settled at the breakfast table. "I want you to help me learn to communicate with them properly. I'll double your salary." "Mr. Henderson." "Marcus, please. After yesterday, I think we can drop the formality." The way he said it sent a strange flutter through my chest. This was moving too fast, crossing too many lines. But looking at Emma and Ethan, so happy to have their father's attention, I couldn't bring myself to say no. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Teach me sign language, help me understand their world better, and—" He hesitated. "Be their temporary caregiver until I can find someone properly qualified, someone who understands their needs." "I'm not qualified either," I protested. "I'm a housekeeper who knows some sign language." "You're someone who sees my children as whole people. That's more qualification than anyone else has shown." The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. I still cleaned the house, but I also spent hours each day with Marcus and the twins, teaching him signs, explaining how Emma liked to feel music through different objects, showing him how Ethan communicated better when he could touch your hands while you talked. Marcus was a surprisingly dedicated student. He practiced signs during his conference calls, asked me to repeat lessons when he didn't understand. Slowly, beautifully, I watched him reconnect with his children. But I also started noticing things about him that made me uncomfortable. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his hand would linger when he passed me papers. The way he'd started asking about my life outside of work. "Do you have children of your own?" he asked one afternoon as we watched the twins play in the garden. "A daughter," I said carefully. "She's 22, finishing college." "Her father?" I stiffened. "Not in the picture." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." But he was prying, and I was starting to realize why Mrs. Peterson had made that comment about things not ending well. This situation was becoming complicated in ways I'd never intended. 3 weeks after Mrs. Peterson left, Marcus's sister Claire came to visit. I'd heard about her, but never met her. She lived in California and rarely visited. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, all business suits and skeptical expressions. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard raised voices from the living room. "Are you out of your mind, Marcus?" Claire was saying. "You fired a qualified nanny to replace her with the maid?" "Courtney isn't just the maid," Marcus's voice was defensive. "She's been the only person to truly connect with Emma and Ethan since Sarah died. She's a black woman, Marcus. Do you have any idea how this looks? How the other parents at their school will talk? How your business associates will react?" I froze, a plate halfway to the table. There it was, the thing everyone was thinking but no one had said out loud. "I don't care how it looks," Marcus said, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "You should care." These children are going to face enough challenges being deaf. Do you really want to add the gossip about their father's inappropriate relationship with the help? There's no inappropriate relationship, isn't there? I've seen the way you look at her, Marcus, and don't think the rest of the world won't see it too. I set the plate down carefully, my hands shaking. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. I was a 45-year-old black woman working in a white millionaire's house, getting too close to his family. It was a story as old as time, and it never ended well for someone like me. Claire, you're being ridiculous. Am I? Tell me honestly, Marcus, what are your feelings toward this woman? The silence that followed was deafening. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for his answer, dreading his answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. I care about her, more than I should, probably. She's brought life back into this house. She's helped me reconnect with my children. And yes, I've started to have feelings that go beyond professional appreciation. My heart stopped. There it was, out in the open. The thing we'd both been dancing around for weeks. Then you need to end this before it goes any further, Claire said firmly. For everyone's sake, including hers. I couldn't listen anymore. I walked quietly toward the service entrance, intending to slip out and give them privacy to finish their conversation. But as I reached the door, I heard Marcus say something that made my blood turn to ice. You don't understand, Claire. It's too late to end it. I'm already in love with her. I stood frozen at the service door, Marcus's words echoing in my head. I'm already in love with her. This was a disaster. I was a divorced black woman who cleaned toilets for a living. He was a white millionaire widower with 2 children who needed stability, not the chaos that would come from their father's relationship with the help becoming public. I slipped out of the house and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to calm my racing heart. Everything Claire had said was true. I'd seen enough movies, read enough stories to know how this would go. The wealthy white man and his black housekeeper. Even in 2023, people would talk, judge, make assumptions. But worse than that, what if Marcus's feelings weren't real? What if he was just confused, grateful for what I'd done with his children, mistaking appreciation for something deeper? What if I let myself feel something back and it all fell apart? I'd been down that road before. My ex-husband had made me plenty of promises before he decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. When I finally went back inside, Claire was gone and Marcus was in his study with the door closed. Emma and Ethan were in the living room, looking confused by all the adult tension they couldn't quite understand. Everything okay? I signed to them. Emma shrugged and made a sign I'd learned meant grown-ups are weird. Even at 8, she was perceptive. I spent the rest of the afternoon focused entirely on the children, avoiding Marcus completely. But when it came time for their dinner, he appeared in the kitchen. We need to talk, he said quietly. Mr. Henderson, Marcus, and yes, we do. Please. I served the twins their meal and got them settled with their tablets before following him to his study. He closed the door behind us, and suddenly, the room felt too small. You heard what I said to Claire. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I meant it, Courtney. Every word. You can't, I said, finding my voice at last. You can't mean it. I work for you. I clean your house. You brought my children back to life. You brought me back to life. He stepped closer, and I backed against the bookshelf. Do you think I care about any of the rest of it? You should care. Your sister was right about everything. The way people will talk, the way it will affect Emma and Ethan. Let me worry about my children. I am worrying about them. They've lost their mother already. They're finally connecting with their father. You think they need the chaos of watching their father have a relationship with someone the world will never accept as appropriate? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Is that really why you're scared? Because of what other people will think? Or is it because you feel something too, and that terrifies you? I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Somewhere along the way, between teaching him to sign and watching him discover joy with his children, I'd started feeling things I had no business feeling. It doesn't matter what I feel, I said finally. This can't happen. Why not? Because I'm not stupid enough to believe in fairy tales anymore. Because men like you don't really fall for women like me. Because when the novelty wears off and reality sets in, I'll be the one who gets hurt. and Emma and Ethan will lose someone else they care about. The pain that crossed his face looked genuine, but I'd thought my ex-husband's promises were genuine too. You think I'm playing games with you? I think you're a grieving widower who's grateful to someone who helped you reconnect with your children. I think you're confusing gratitude with something else. You're wrong. Am I? Then tell me, Marcus, what happens when your friends find out, when your business associates start talking, when the parents at Emma and Ethan's school start whispering? What happens when loving me starts costing you things that matter? He was quiet for too long, and in that silence, I had my answer. That's what I thought, I said softly. I should go. Courtney, wait. But I was already at the door. I'll finish out the week. Give you time to find someone else to help with the children. I don't want someone else. I turned back to look at him. This man who just admitted he loved me, but couldn't promise he'd choose me when it mattered. Then you should have thought about that before you let this go so far. I left his study and went to say goodbye to Emma and Ethan. They were still at the kitchen table, signing to each other about something that made them giggle. When they saw me, Emma reached for my hand. Story, she signed. It was part of our evening routine. I'd tell them stories with exaggerated gestures that they could follow. Not tonight, sweetheart, I signed back. But I'll see you tomorrow, okay? She looked confused but nodded. Ethan waved goodbye with both hands, our little inside joke. As I drove home, I kept thinking about the look in Marcus's eyes when I'd asked what would happen when loving me started costing him things. The hesitation, the uncertainty. I'd been right to end this before it went any further. I'd protected myself, protected those children from future heartbreak. So why did it feel like I was making the biggest mistake of my life? The next morning, I arrived at work to find a dozen roses on the kitchen counter with a note. We need to talk. Please don't give up on us. M. But it wasn't the roses that made my breath catch. It was the second note, in Emma's careful handwriting. Please don't leave us, Miss Courtney. We love you too. And that's when I realized this situation had become more complicated than I'd ever imagined. I stared at Emma's note until the words blurred together. We love you too. These children had already lost their mother. Now they thought they were losing me. I crumpled both notes and threw them in the trash, but I couldn't throw away the guilt that was eating at me. This was exactly why I should have maintained professional boundaries from the beginning. The twins were unusually quiet that morning. They kept looking at me with worried expressions, as if they could sense something was wrong. Marcus appeared briefly before leaving for work, his eyes searching my face for any sign that I'd reconsidered. We'll talk tonight, he said quietly. Please. I nodded, but only because I owed him a proper explanation. I'd finish out the week as promised, help him transition to whatever arrangement he made next, and then I'd walk away before anyone else got hurt. But the universe had other plans. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my daughter Jasmine, calling from college. Mom, I need to tell you something, and you're going to freak out. My heart skipped. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Sick? No, nothing like that. But I'm pregnant. I sank into a kitchen chair. My 22-year-old daughter, 3 months away from graduation, was pregnant. Jazz, honey. I know what you're thinking, but Devin and I want this baby. We're getting married next month, and we want you there. Can you take some time off work? Devin was a good kid, and they'd been together for 2 years, but they were both so young, had so many plans that would now have to change. Of course I'll be there, I said automatically. Whatever you need. After I hung up, I sat in that kitchen trying to process everything. My daughter was having a baby. I was going to be a grandmother. And here I was, caught up in an impossible situation with my employer instead of focusing on my own family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been worried about crossing lines with Marcus when I should have been paying attention to my own life. Emma found me sitting there an hour later, tears I hadn't realized I was crying still wet on my cheeks. She climbed into my lap without invitation, something she'd started doing in recent weeks, and touched my face gently. Sad? She signed. Happy tears, I signed back. I'm going to be a grandmother. Her eyes lit up. She didn't fully understand what that meant, but she caught my change in mood. She made the sign for baby with her hands, a question in her expression. My daughter is having a baby, I explained, using simple signs she could follow. Emma clapped her hands together and started signing rapidly, too fast for me to follow completely. But I caught enough. She was excited, asking questions about the baby, when it would come, if she could meet it. For a moment, I forgot about all the complications with Marcus and just enjoyed sharing this news with this sweet child who'd become so important to me. That's how Marcus found us when he came home early from work. Emma in my lap, both of us signing animatedly about babies and families. "Good news?" he asked, his voice cautious. "My daughter's having a baby," I said, gently moving Emma off my lap as he approached. Something flickered in his expression. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news." But I could see him calculating what this meant. Another reason for me to leave, to focus on my own family instead of his. "Emma, why don't you go find Ethan?" Marcus suggested. "I think he's in the playroom." She nodded and skipped away, still excited about the baby news. "Courtney, this doesn't change anything about our conversation yesterday," I said quickly. "If anything, it confirms that I was right. I need to focus on my own family." "Of course you do, but that doesn't mean we can't..." "Can't what, Marcus? Can't figure out how to make this work despite all the reasons it won't? Can't pretend that loving you won't cost me things I can't afford to lose?" He was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "What if I told you? I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about what happens when loving you starts costing me things. I'd say it's too late for that conversation." "No, hear me out." He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to back away. "You were right to ask those questions, and you were right that I hesitated when you asked them, but not for the reasons you think. Marcus, I hesitated because I was afraid, not of what other people would think, but of what I'd do if loving you put you in danger. If the attention, the gossip, the scrutiny hurt you or made your life harder." I stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you enough to fight for us, but I also love you enough to protect you if that's what you need, even if it means protecting you from me." The sincerity in his voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. That's a pretty speech, but it doesn't change the reality of our situation, doesn't it? What if I told you I've been making some changes? What if I told you I spoke to my lawyer this morning about updating my will to include provisions for you and your family? What if I told you I called Emma and Ethan's school to ask about their policies regarding family structure diversity? My breath caught. "You did what?" "I told you I love you, Courtney. I meant it. And when I love someone, I don't do it halfway." For a moment, I let myself believe it could be real. This man who just admitted to taking concrete steps to make space for me in his life. But then reality crashed back. And what happens if it doesn't work out? What happens if we try this and it falls apart in 6 months or a year? You'll still be fine. You'll still be a millionaire with a beautiful house and successful business. But me? I'll be the black woman who got ideas above her station and paid the price for it. You really think I'd abandon you like that? I think you're a good man who means well. But I also think you have no idea what you're asking me to risk. Before he could respond, Emma came running back into the kitchen, Ethan close behind her. They were both signing excitedly, something about the baby and a drawing they wanted to make. Looking at their innocent faces, their excitement about my family's news, I felt something shift inside me. These children had already claimed a piece of my heart, and despite all my fears, despite all the rational reasons to walk away, I was starting to realize that some risks might be worth taking. But just as I opened my mouth to say something to Marcus, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," he said, squeezing my hand briefly as he passed. I heard voices at the front door, then footsteps returning to the kitchen. Marcus appeared with a woman I didn't recognize, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never questioning her place in the world. "Courtney," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral, "I'd like you to meet Victoria Sterling. She's the head of the most prestigious nanny agency in the city." Victoria's smile was polite, but cold as she looked me up and down. "Mr. Henderson has asked me to find suitable care for the twins. I understand you've been filling in temporarily." And just like that, the fantasy came crashing down. While I'd been wrestling with my feelings, Marcus had been making practical arrangements. He was replacing me, just like he'd replaced Mrs. Peterson. The message was clear. Whatever he'd said about loving me, whatever changes he claimed to be making, he was still moving forward with finding someone suitable for his children, someone who wasn't me. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice tense, "I called Ms. Sterling before our conversation yesterday. I should have canceled when— No need to explain, Mr. Henderson, Victoria interrupted smoothly. I completely understand the situation. It's quite common for families to become attached to temporary help during times of transition. The way she said attached made my skin crawl, like I was a stray dog they'd gotten too fond of. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Marcus started to say, but I cut him off. No misunderstanding at all. I untied my apron with steady hands. Ms. Sterling, the children are wonderful. They've been through a lot, but they're resilient. They know basic sign language and respond well to patience and genuine affection. Of course, Victoria said, though her smile never reached her eyes. I have several candidates who are specifically trained in special needs care, all with impeccable credentials and references from the best families. I'm sure they're very qualified, I said, proud that my voice remained steady. Emma and Ethan were watching this exchange with growing confusion. They could sense the tension, even if they couldn't hear the words. Emma moved closer to me, slipping her small hand into mine. Ms. Sterling, Marcus said, his jaw tight. Perhaps we could reschedule this meeting. I need to speak with— Daddy? Ethan had learned to speak a few words, though his pronunciation was imperfect. Courtney Stay? The hope in his voice almost shattered my composure. Emma was signing something frantically, asking what was happening, why the strange lady was there if I was leaving. It's okay, sweetheart, I signed to her. Your daddy is finding someone new to take care of you. Someone who can teach you even more than I can. Don't want new person, Emma signed back, tears starting to form in her eyes. Want you. Victoria was watching this interaction with obvious disapproval. Mr. Henderson, this emotional attachment is exactly why it's important to maintain professional boundaries with domestic staff. The children will adjust to proper care much more easily if the transition is handled correctly. Professional boundaries, I repeated, looking directly at Marcus. Yes, those are important, aren't they? Something passed between us, hurt, regret, the recognition that we were both trapped in a situation we'd let get out of hand. Courtney, Marcus started to speak, but his phone rang, his business line. After a moment's hesitation, he answered it. Henderson. His face immediately grew serious. What do you mean they're pulling out? We had a deal. He moved toward his study, still talking. I'll be right there. He hung up and turned back to us, clearly torn between his business crisis and the personal one unfolding in his kitchen. Ms. Sterling, I'm sorry, but we'll have to reschedule. I have an emergency at the office. Of course, Victoria said. But Mr. Henderson, I do think it would be best if we could arrange for the temporary arrangement to end as soon as possible. For everyone's sake. She looked pointedly at me, then at the children clinging to my sides. You're probably right, Marcus said quietly, and I felt something inside me die. He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at me. We'll finish our conversation when I get back. But I knew we wouldn't. The moment had passed, reality had intruded, and we were all just going to pretend the last few weeks hadn't happened. Victoria lingered after Marcus left, making small talk about the children's schedules while taking notes on her phone. Emma and Ethan stayed close to me, sensing that something was ending. I'll send over some candidate profiles by tomorrow, Victoria told me as she prepared to leave. I'm sure we can have someone in place by Monday. These transitions go much smoother when they're handled quickly. After she left, I sat with the twins in their playroom, trying to find the words to explain what was happening. How do you tell children that the adult they've grown attached to is leaving? How do you make them understand that sometimes caring about someone isn't enough? Are you leaving us? Emma signed, her lower lip trembling. I wanted to lie, to tell her everything would be fine. But these children had already lost their mother to lies. The adult lie that everything would be okay when it wouldn't be. Your daddy is finding someone better to take care of you, I signed. Someone who can teach you more things, help you learn better. Don't want better, Ethan said aloud, his words thick but clear. Want Courtney. I pulled them both close, breathing in their little kid scent of shampoo and playground dirt. Sometimes what we want and what's best for us are different things. We spent the afternoon playing their favorite games, reading stories, dancing to music they felt through the floor. I tried to memorize every detail. Emma's giggle when I made funny faces, Ethan's concentration when he practiced new signs, the way they both looked at me like I hung the moon. Marcus didn't come home until after 8. The children were already in bed, and I was finishing up in the kitchen when he walked in, looking exhausted and defeated. "The Singapore deal fell through," he said without preamble. 3 months of negotiations, gone. They decided to go with a company that has better cultural alignment. I didn't ask what that meant. We both knew. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Are you?" "Because part of me wonders if you're thinking this proves your point, that loving you will cost me things that matter." I set down the dish towel and really looked at him. His tie was loosened, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He looked like a man who'd been fighting battles on multiple fronts and losing all of them. "Is that what you think? That I wanted you to lose that deal?" "I think you're scared, and you're looking for reasons to prove that we can't work." "I don't need to look for reasons, Marcus. They're everywhere." Victoria Sterling made that pretty clear today. Victoria Sterling is a snob who doesn't know anything about my family or what we need. She knows what the world expects, what's considered appropriate. "Since when do you care what's considered appropriate?" His voice rose slightly. "The woman I've fallen in love with doesn't worry about what society expects. She dances with deaf children because it makes them happy. She learns sign language because it's the right thing to do. She fights for what matters. The woman you've fallen in love with is tired, Marcus. I'm 45 years old. I've spent most of my adult life cleaning up other people's messes and keeping my head down so I don't cause trouble. Maybe I don't have any more fights left in me." "I don't believe that." "Then you don't know me as well as you think you do." We stood there in his expensive kitchen, the distance between us feeling like an ocean. I could see the exact moment he realized I wasn't going to change my mind. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now you hire one of Victoria's candidates, someone appropriate, qualified, professional. Your children will be fine. They're resilient. And us?" I looked away. "There is no us. There never was. Don't do that. Don't rewrite history because you're scared." "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm accepting reality. You're a wealthy white widower with 2 children who need stability. I'm your black housekeeper who got ideas above her station. This was always going to end the same way." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but maybe that was for the best. Maybe we both needed to hear the ugly truth spoken out loud. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "If that's really how you see yourself, then maybe you're right. Maybe this never could have worked." It felt like a slap, even though I'd been the one to say it first. "I'll pack up my things and leave tomorrow," I said. "I'll say goodbye to the children in the morning. Courtney, please don't make this harder than it has to be." I walked toward the service door, the same exit I'd been using for 3 years. But just as I reached it, Marcus called out, "For what it's worth, you were never just the help to me. You were never just anything to me." I didn't turn around. I couldn't let him see that his words had found their mark. "Good night, Mr. Henderson," I said, and walked out of his life. But as I sat in my car in the driveway, I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. Through the kitchen window, I could see Marcus still standing where I'd left him, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life by walking away from a man who might actually be worth the risk. My phone buzzed with a text message. I looked down, expecting it to be from Jasmine about wedding plans. Instead, it was from a number I didn't recognize. "You made the right choice. Some people never learn their place. V.S. Victoria Sterling." Somehow she'd gotten my number, and she was making sure I knew that walking away was the only acceptable option. But instead of feeling validated, I felt something else entirely. I felt angry. Victoria Sterling's text stared back at me from my phone screen, and something inside me snapped. Some people never learn their place. My place? My place was wherever I decided it was, not where some high society woman thought I belonged. I sat in that car, fury building in my chest like a storm. I'd spent 45 years letting people tell me what my place was. My ex-husband, who decided I wasn't worth fighting for when things got tough. Employers who treated me like I was invisible. And now, Victoria Sterling, making sure I knew I should be grateful for the privilege of walking away quietly. But what made me angriest wasn't Victoria's message. It was the realization that I'd been doing the same thing to myself. I'd been so focused on protecting myself from potential hurt that I'd convinced myself I wasn't worth the risk. Marcus had said he loved me. He'd talked to his lawyer, called the children's school, made concrete plans to make room for me in his life. And I'd thrown it all away because Victoria Sterling and people like her had made me believe that loving him was reaching above my station. My station. Like I was still living in 1923 instead of 2023. I got out of the car and marched back to the house. I still had my key. I was supposed to work one more day. Marcus was in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "I thought you left. Victoria Sterling sent me a text." I showed him my phone. His expression darkened as he read it. "How did she get your number?" "That's not the point. The point is that she felt comfortable sending this to me because she assumed I'd agree with her, that I'd accept that I should know my place and stay in it." Marcus stood up, his jaw tight with anger. "I'm calling her right now. This is completely unacceptable." "No." I held up my hand to stop him. "I don't need you to fight this battle for me. I need to fight it myself." "Courtney, do you still love me?" I asked, cutting straight to the heart of it. "Of course I do. That hasn't changed in the last 2 hours. Are you still willing to deal with the gossip, the judgment, the people who think you're crazy for choosing me?" "Yes, I told you that. And when your business associates give you looks, when other parents at school whisper, when people like Victoria Sterling make snide comments at charity events, then they can all go to hell," he said fiercely. "Courtney, what is this about?" I took a deep breath. "This is about me realizing that I've been as prejudiced as anyone else. I've been so convinced that I'm not good enough for you that I never stopped to consider that maybe you're not good enough for me either." His eyebrows rose. "Excuse me? You heard me. Maybe I deserve better than a man who calls nanny agencies behind my back. Maybe I deserve better than someone who lets his sister and business associates' opinions matter more than his own heart. That's not what happened, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were hedging your bets, telling me you loved me while still interviewing my replacements." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear on his face. "I called Victoria before our conversation yesterday. I was trying to do the responsible thing, find proper care for my children. Your children don't need proper care. They need love. They need someone who sees them as whole people, not problems to be managed. And they need a father who's brave enough to choose what's right over what's expected. Is that what you think I didn't do? I think you got scared when Claire pointed out all the ways loving me might complicate your life. I think you started second-guessing yourself and looking for the safe choice." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him processing my words. "You're right," he said finally. "I did get scared. Not of loving you, but of the idea that loving me might hurt you. I've seen how cruel people can be, especially to women who don't fit their narrow ideas of what's appropriate. So you decided to hurt me first, to spare me the pain of dealing with other people's cruelty? I decided to give you an out, to make it easy for you to walk away if that's what you wanted. What I wanted was for you to fight for us. What I wanted was for you to choose me, even when it was hard. I am choosing you," he said, stepping closer. "I'm choosing you right now, in this moment. But Courtney, I need to know that you're choosing me too, not running away the first time things get complicated." I looked at this man who'd somehow managed to break through walls I'd spent decades building. This man who'd learned sign language to talk to his children, who'd fired a nanny because she didn't see their worth, who'd fallen in love with me despite every reason it would be easier not to. "What about your business deal? The Singapore thing? What about it? Won't dating me make things harder? Cost you opportunities?" Marcus cupped my face in his hands. "Courtney, listen to me. Any business partner who would reject me because of who I love isn't someone I want to work with anyway. Any opportunity that costs me, you isn't worth having. And what about Emma and Ethan? They've lost so much already. What if this doesn't work out between us? Then we'll deal with it like adults. We'll make sure they're okay, that they feel secure and loved no matter what. But Courtney, what if it does work out? What if we're throwing away something amazing because we're too scared to try?" I thought about my daughter's news, about becoming a grandmother, about all the ways love had surprised me throughout my life. The good surprises and the bad ones, the relationships that had lasted and the ones that hadn't. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of facing whatever comes next, even if it means dealing with people like Victoria Sterling for the rest of your life. Especially then. Because people like her only have power if we let them. And I'm done letting other people's opinions dictate my choices. I was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision in front of me. Then I pulled out my phone and typed a response to Victoria's text. Thank you for reminding me that my place is wherever I choose it to be. I choose to be here. I showed Marcus the message before I sent it. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time since this whole mess started. Does this mean you'll stay? He asked. This means I'll try. But Marcus, if we're going to do this, we do it right. No more making decisions about us without talking to me first. No more assuming you know what's best for me. Agreed. And Courtney? No more assuming you know what I'm thinking or why I'm making the choices I make. If you have questions, ask me. Deal. He kissed me then, right there in his living room, and it felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at the same time. But we were interrupted by a small sound from the stairway. Emma was sitting on the steps in her pajamas, watching us with wide eyes. She'd clearly snuck out of bed and witnessed our entire conversation. Courtney, stay, she signed hopefully. I walked over to her and knelt down so we were eye level. Would you like me to stay? She nodded so enthusiastically that her whole body shook. Then she threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. Forever? She signed against my shoulder. I looked over at Marcus, who was watching us with an expression of pure love and wonder. We'll see, I signed back. But for now, yes, I'm staying. Emma ran upstairs to wake up Ethan and share the good news. Within minutes, both children were in the living room in their pajamas, signing rapidly and grinning from ear to ear. As I watched Marcus try to keep up with their excited chatter, I realized something important. We might face judgment from people like Victoria Sterling. We might have to navigate complicated conversations and social situations. We might have to be braver than either of us felt ready to be. But we'd do it together, and maybe that would be enough. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of what had become our home, watching through the window as Marcus taught Emma and Ethan to plant flowers in the garden. They were all covered in dirt, signing and laughing, and my heart felt so full it might burst. A lot had changed since that night, when I almost walked away for good. Marcus had officially hired me as the children's full-time caregiver, with a salary that made my jaw drop. Victoria Sterling had been professionally but firmly dismissed. Her agency told their services would no longer be needed. More importantly, we'd had the difficult conversations about expectations, about boundaries, about how to blend our lives in a way that honored both our needs and the children's, about the reality of being an interracial couple in spaces where that still raised eyebrows. It hadn't all been smooth. There had been awkward moments at school functions, a few social events where conversations stopped when we walked into rooms together. Marcus's business partner had made some uncomfortable comments about political correctness that had resulted in a very frank discussion about respect and partnership. But there had been beautiful moments too. Emma had started calling me Mama C, which made me cry every time. Ethan was now fluent enough in sign language to tell elaborate stories about his day. And Marcus had surprised everyone, including himself, by how naturally he'd adapted to being part of a larger, more complicated family structure. My daughter Jasmine had visited last month with her new husband Devon. Watching Marcus nervously ask Devon about his engineering studies, seeing him help Jasmine set up a nursery area for when the baby visited, witnessing him include my family in his world with such genuine warmth, it had cemented something in my heart that I'd been afraid to fully embrace. "Mom, you're glowing," Jasmine had said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. "I've never seen you this happy." She was right. I was happy in a way I'd never been before, not just because of Marcus, but because I'd finally learned to believe I deserved this kind of love, this kind of partnership, this kind of life. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Claire, Marcus's sister, standing on the porch with a large gift bag and a somewhat sheepish expression. "Hi, Courtney. Is Marcus home?" "He's in the garden with the kids. Come in." Claire and I had had our own difficult conversations over the past few months. She'd apologized for some of her initial comments, admitted that her concerns had been more about protecting Marcus from potential hurt than any real objection to me personally. We weren't exactly friends yet, but we'd reached a place of mutual respect. "Actually, I was hoping to talk to you first," she said, setting down the gift bag. I wanted to apologize, again. More specifically this time. I gestured for her to sit at the kitchen island. Claire, you don't need to keep apologizing. We've talked about this. No, we haven't. Not really. I've apologized for my concerns about appearances, about what other people might think, but I haven't apologized for the real problem. She paused, looking uncomfortable but determined. The real problem was that I didn't see you. I saw a stereotype, a potential complication in my brother's life. I didn't see the woman who brought joy back into his world, who helped him reconnect with his children, who makes him laugh again for the first time since Sarah died. Claire, I'm not finished. I also didn't see the woman who was brave enough to challenge him when he needed it, smart enough to call him on his mistakes, strong enough to walk away when she thought it was best for everyone involved. I didn't see you as a person with your own dreams and fears and worth. She reached into the gift bag and pulled out a photo album. I've been putting this together for the past month. Pictures from the last 6 months. Marcus sent them to me. The kids' school events, family dinners, everyday moments. I wanted you to have them, and I wanted you to know that when I look at these pictures, I see a family. A real family. Not my brother's charity case or his midlife crisis. A family. I opened the album with shaking hands. There we were. Marcus and me and the twins at Emma's school play, where she'd signed her lines while speaking them aloud. The 4 of us at a Thanksgiving dinner where Ethan had insisted on saying grace in sign language. Marcus teaching me to drive his ridiculous expensive car while the kids laughed from the back seat. Me reading bedtime stories with exaggerated gestures that had become our nightly routine. In every picture, we looked like what we'd become. A family that had found each other against all odds and made it work through love and determination and the willingness to fight for something worth having. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This means everything to me. There's something else. Claire reached into the bag again and pulled out a small velvet box. Marcus asked me to hold on to this until the right moment. He said he'd know when that was. My breath caught. Claire, what is that? I think you know what it is. And before you panic, he's not asking me to propose for him. He just wanted someone to tell you that he's serious about this, about you, about the future you're building together. I stared at the box, my heart racing. Did he tell you to give this to me now? No. I decided on my own that now was the right time. Because Courtney, in all these pictures, in every story Marcus tells about you, in the way his children light up when they talk about their Mama C, I can see something beautiful. And I wanted you to know that you have my blessing, my support, and my promise to never again question whether you belong in this family. Before I could respond, the back door burst open, and Emma came running in, covered in dirt and grinning from ear to ear. Mama C, we planted sunflowers. Daddy says they'll grow taller than me. Ethan was close behind, signing rapidly about the worms they'd found and the butterfly that had landed on his hand. Marcus appeared last, his shirt dirty and his hair messy, and his smile bright enough to light up the whole kitchen. Claire, he said, surprised but pleased. What are you doing here? Just delivering some photos, Claire said, winking at me. And having a good conversation with Courtney. Marcus's eyes fell on the photo album in my hands, then on the small velvet box sitting on the counter. His expression grew uncertain. Claire, you didn't... I just told her she has my blessing, Claire said, standing up. The rest is between you two. She hugged both children, kissed Marcus on the cheek, and squeezed my hand on her way out. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think Sarah would have loved you, and I think she would have been grateful that you brought her family back to life. After she left, we got the children cleaned up and settled with a movie. Marcus and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the garden they'd worked on together. So, he said eventually, Claire gave you the photos, and the other thing. I told her to wait until I was ready to... He stopped, looking at me carefully. Unless you don't want me to be ready. Unless this is all moving too fast. I thought about everything that had brought us to this moment. The dancing in the music room that had started it all. The fights and the fears and the obstacles we'd overcome. The family we'd built from broken pieces and careful trust. Marcus, I said, I'm 45 years old. I've been married before. I'm about to become a grandmother. And I've spent most of my adult life believing that fairy tale endings weren't for women like me. His face fell slightly. Courtney, I'm not finished. What I'm trying to say is that I'm old enough to know the difference between fantasy and reality. And the reality is that I love you. I love Emma and Ethan. I love the life we've built together, even when it's messy and complicated and harder than either of us expected. I picked up the velvet box and held it out to him. So, if you're asking, the answer is yes. But I want you to ask properly, in front of the kids, so they know they're getting a say in this decision too. Marcus's smile was brighter than the setting sun. You want them to be part of it? They're part of everything else. Why should this be different? That evening, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, we gathered in the living room. Emma and Ethan sat on the couch between us, curious about why this felt like a special occasion. Emma, Ethan, Marcus began, his hands moving as he signed along with his words. Courtney and I have something important to ask you. He got down on one knee in front of all three of us, the ring box in his hands. We want to know if you'd like us to be a real family, officially, forever. Emma's eyes went wide. She looked between Marcus and me, processing what this meant. You want to marry Mama C? She signed. I want to marry Mama C if she'll have me, and if you and Ethan think it's a good idea. Ethan clapped his hands and nodded enthusiastically. Emma was more thoughtful, her 8-year-old mind working through the implications. Will she still live here? She signed. Yes, I answered. If you want me to. Will you still be our Mama C? Always. Emma considered this for another moment, then broke into a grin. Then yes, ask her. Marcus turned to me, his eyes bright with love and hope and the promise of whatever came next. Courtney, he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Will you marry me? Will you let us be your family officially and forever? Yes, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, Emma and Ethan cheered and signed their approval. We were a family celebrating a new beginning. 4 people who'd found each other against all odds and decided to build something beautiful together. Later that night, after the children were asleep and we were cleaning up the kitchen together, Marcus asked me something I'd been wondering about too. Do you ever think about that first day? When I found you dancing with them in the music room? Every day, I admitted. Do you? I think about how close I came to missing it, to missing you, to letting grief and fear keep me from seeing what was right in front of me. We both almost missed it, I reminded him. I was so convinced it couldn't work that I almost walked away. But you didn't. We didn't. No, I agreed, looking down at the ring on my finger, at this symbol of the life we'd chosen to build together. We didn't. 6 months ago, I'd been just their black maid, a woman who cleaned their floors and kept her head down and tried not to cause trouble. Tonight, I was the woman Marcus Henderson had chosen to spend his life with, the woman Emma and Ethan called Mama C, the woman who'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is believe you deserve the love that's being offered to you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that love turns out to be everything you never dared to dream you could have.